Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. Now, recently, a release date and a new trailer was made public surrounding the new Star Wars Battlefront EA2, which will contain a single-player story from the developers that brought you such wonderful story experiences like Mirror's Edge, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, and at least a full third of all Battlefield titles, including Battlefield 1. I can scarcely contain my excitement. But before I talk about the fairly small amount of information that was released in regards to the new game by DICE, I would like to take a few moments to remind everyone of the experience we had with the first Star Wars Battlefront EA game. Now, Star Wars Battlefront EA was released in 2015 by DICE Studios and Criterion Software. Both are subsidiaries of Electronic Arts. This game was a reboot of the original Star Wars Battlefront series that was first launched in 2004 by Pandemic Studios. Now, that series was much loved by fans, and the hype generated by the new EA reboot was phenomenal. It did get tempered somewhat once it became public knowledge that there was going to be no campaign mode to be had whatsoever, but many, including myself, were willing to skeptically give the game a chance. And despite the grace that this game still somehow manages to get from traditional games media, it was regarded as being gorgeous, but vacuously empty. The game attempted to create the feeling of isolation that one can experience on the battlefield in order to increase the realism, or so they say, which unfortunately had the opposite to the intended effect. The way the game was designed, it did its best to actively prevent people from working together or even communicate with each other. It made the player feel very much like they were playing a single-player game in a multiplayer environment, surrounded by people playing their own single-player game. It was dull, it was boring, and because of this and the lack of a single-player experience, it had no longevity. In spite of over 14 million copies sold across the different platforms, the game currently has barely 50,000 people actively playing the game now, with a lion's share being on PlayStation 4, clocking in at 26,000 active players. Xbox One comes in second at a little over 18,000, and the fewest number of players on the PC at under 6,000 concurrent players within a 24-hour weekend period. Now, in addition to that, barely 2 months after the game's launch, you would be hard-pressed to find a full 100,000 people playing the game combined over a 24-hour period on the weekend. And that's 2 months after launch, with 14 million copies sold. All these numbers flew very much in the face of EA's assertion that millions of people were still playing the game. And why? Well, because it was a bad game. Now, don't get me wrong, it was gorgeous, with a soundtrack that was extremely impressive, but when you're dealing with a multiplayer-only experience, it's got to be one hell of a multiplayer game, and when you're playing a multiplayer game, part of that concept is, at least to my mind in a game like this, very much that aspect of teamwork and coordination to overcome the other team. It was that sort of experience that EA's first Battlefront attempt completely excluded and made impossible. By its very design, it prevented most aspects of a multiplayer experience. Now, in addition to that, the biggest draw to any Star Wars game is the aspect of immersing yourself in the world and, of course, the space combat. Both of those experiences were also actively denied in Star Wars Battlefront EA, and it is those features that EA is promising in this upcoming Battlefront EA2. The story mode will focus around Iden Verso, the commander of Inferno Squad, an Imperial Special Forces commando team that is also a fighter pilot squadron, which sounds vaguely familiar. It'll sound extremely familiar to those who have actually read the novelizations surrounding Star Wars over the past decade or so. This actually reminds me very strongly of the X-Wing novels surrounding Rogue Squadron and later Wraith Squadron, where Rogue Squadron was a fighter squadron first with commando skills, whereas Wraith Squadron was later formed to be a commando team first, but were also experienced X-Wing pilots. Now, both squadrons operated under Wedge Antilles and were very much considered to be sister squadrons and even performed some joint operations together. But it's that tactical fighter-pilot mindset that they seem to be drawing inspiration from very directly here in this instance. However, it is stated that the story mode in the game itself will span 30 years within the Star Wars universe, so I'm expecting DICE to make use of the same method of storytelling that they implemented with Battlefield 1, where you have several short stories to be played through across the different settings, and if so, I would consider this to be a bit of a travesty. And what we had with Battlefield 1 were a series of ultimately unsatisfying and weak stories that took between 4 and 6 hours to play through, all of them combined. And if we're delivered more of the same, which I expect we will, given DICE's experience with telling a story, the story mode will ultimately do more harm than good. You see, what made the Star Wars universe so fantastic for gaming was the sheer number of stories that could be told in a romanticized, futuristic setting. The Star Wars universe had, up until recently, over 50 years of in-universe story with characters that had been developed through movies, television shows, graphic novels, and entire novel series, some of which spanning 10 or more novels in a single story arc. Now, in addition, we did have some fantastic video games in the past that introduced us to yet new characters and amazing story arcs as well. Games like Knights of the Old Republic, which was an amazing game and on my top 20 list of best games of all time. And unfortunately, I don't think I will be happy with this new license that EA seems intent on violating at every turn in order to garner a profit. The multiplayer component of the game will be more of the same from DICE, and will also finally include up to 24-player space combat, whereas the land combat will support up to 40 players. This is a step back from the 64-player combat that Battlefield 1 has, and this may be a consideration toward increasing the ease of which to find matches. Now, console players will have access to split-screen co-op, however, PC gamers continue to be slighted and are considered very much second-class citizens by DICE, at least in this regard, which, of course, means I am a PC gamer. I'm both disappointed and not surprised. Several AAA companies that release yearly revision first-person shooter with stealth element games like Battlefield and Call of Duty know where their bread is buttered. They know that their much larger player base is most definitely going to be on the console platforms, reason being that there are far more titles on the PC, and gamers there have much more choice than the year's AAA shiny. Also, conversely, it is that choice that means it is much harder to keep a PC gamer interested in a new title for long. It's that glut of availability that may have forced this mindset by companies like DICE over the years to take root. And it is the result of that mindset that companies like DICE prefer to focus on the consoles and provide the increased functionality there. It's also this dichotomy and lack of functionality within the game itself that PC gamers will most likely be up in arms about, but we'll see once the game is finally released. Now, the game is touting the Kylo Ren and Rey themes, however, these appear to be, of course, locked behind EA's ever-present pre-order paywall. These pre-orders come so far in the standard and deluxe packages and provide the following. Now, for the deluxe edition, we have access to play Star Wars Battlefront 2 on November 14th, a 3-day head start. Upgraded versions of all 4 trooper classes, Officer, Assault, Heavy, and Specialist. 4 epic ability upgrades, 1 for each trooper class, instant weapon unlocks and weapon modifications for each trooper class, exclusive Kylo Ren and Rey themed looks inspired by Star Wars The Last Jedi, epic ability modifiers for Kylo Ren and Rey, and an epic ability modifier for the Millennium Falcon. So, I apologize, I don't think the Kylo Ren and Rey themes are actually locked behind the pre-order paywall. I think these are going to be special skins for them. So, my apologies if I related incorrect information there. That's not my intention. So, I think these are just additional skins. Now, in the Standard Edition pre-order, they provide the following. Exclusive Kylo Ren and Rey themed looks inspired by Star Wars The Last Jedi, epic ability modifiers for Kylo Ren and Rey, an epic ability modifier for the Millennium Falcon, and much more. Now, I absolutely loathe that they could list "and much more" as an actual feature. Only a AAA company would tout some nebulous thing as an actual feature to entice people to give them money for their product sight unseen. The sheer audacity... No, you know what? No. I'm going to save that. I promised I wouldn't preach too much in my videos, but what I will do is yet another video on pre-order culture and season passes and how damaging they actually are to the consumer in another video. For those of you that have been following my channel for a year or more, you already know full well my thoughts on the matter, but I think it best to reiterate them to a certain degree, especially in instances like this where they can say, here's a selling point and much more. Not good at all. So this new Star Wars Battlefront EA2 will be released November 17th of this year, and given DICE's pedigree and the results of the previous titles, I am highly skeptical. However, as a reviewer, I will of course have to check it out regardless, but I'm not optimistic. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Are you excited for this new game from DICE? Or do you think it will be more of the same, or do you think they'll improve things over the previous title? And while you're scrolling down there, please remember to drop a like on the video, and please do share it on Twitter and Facebook. If you're new to the channel, then please do subscribe. It does help out more than you might know, and will let you know when I release videos like this one, or my now upcoming discussion piece on pre-order culture and season passes, as well as other industry topics like the upcoming top 10 reasons why Valve should stay away from paid mods that I am still working on, guys. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. But in the meantime, if you want to support my channel even further, there are links to my Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Vote down in the description down below, as well as the email address you can send in requests for games to be covered, which you have until the 22nd of this month before it gets put to the Patreon subscribers to vote on. The winner of that vote will have their requested game critiqued in our standard Is It Worth It series. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and thanks for watching.